Hello, I'm Joe Dillette, and I'm going to talk about sharpening wood carving tools. This is the most difficult skill to learn for wood carving. Probably 90% of your success in wood carving is based on how well you can sharpen tools. Most people don't practice enough. They try to sharpen, they're not successful. They see a machine, $400, I'll buy that machine, then I can sharpen, and they still can't sharpen. And the most important thing is understanding the principle of sharpening, and then you can go up to any machine and it's going to work. So sharpening is a difficult task, and it needs to be practiced over and over again. Almost any piece of equipment is going to sharpen. Anything that scratches metal is going to sharpen. So, because sharpening is just removing the metal. First thing that we talk about is the angle of the sharpening. This is a block plane. It has a blade that's at 45-degree angle. But this is for planing with the grain. When you plane across the grain, there is another plane, and this is for in grain. This blade then is half of that 45 degrees. It's lowered down to 22 degrees. All our wood carving tools are carving in grain. To create a gauge for your sharpening, just take a piece of paper and bisect the angle. Just fold it over right from the corner and create a 45-degree angle. Now that's the angle of the block plane that went with the grain. Bisect that angle once more, fold it again in half, and that will be 22.5 degrees. That's the angle of that in-grain plane, and that's the angle of our carving tools. If you get the Schaaf tools, all of their bevels are at that 22 degrees. They aren't coming completely sharp. You have to put the final touch on it. But here's what you have to understand about their angles. If you have a like this is a 22 degree. The chisels that are like this are also 22 degrees. So if you're sharpening this side is at 11 degrees, and this side is at 11 degrees. The same as this 22, but that is the difference with all carving tools. Not every carver uses it at 22 degrees, but that's a good starting point. I have a little stronger angle on mine. There are a lot of pieces of equipment out there for sharpening, and I want to talk to you about all of them, but the one I prefer is the Schaaf Diamond Stone, and I'll show you why. For many years, I've used an oil stone. This oil stone, you can see how it's nice dished out and everything. And for carving tools, you don't need it flat, but it's nice to have it flat. Ceramic is another type of stone that is used for sharpening. Aluminum oxide is what is in most of the buffing compounds. You need to buff the edge so it's razor sharp. That's what you put on your strop. You can make a strop out of any material, out of wood, out of leather. When you're using an oil stone, you need to put a lubricant on because the metal will embed into the stone and the stone loads up. Oil that you use is a honing oil. If you use a lubricating oil, it's going to work, but it'll be very difficult to sharpen, because what a lubricating oil does is it puts a protective coating on it. It wants to prevent scratches, minimize friction. It's designed to put the coating on, and you don't want a coating on the stone. You want to get that metal right into the stone, and yet you need a lubricant to get it loosened out of the stone so it doesn't build up. The Japanese water stones, they use water to accomplish that same task. Japanese water stones are quite expensive. They're a little bit more difficult to use because you've got the water to contend with. The slurry on top of the stone, it wears quickly. The flatness of the stone is an issue. Very few carvers use them because of the water that's around it. The diamond stones, this is a diamond stone that I have, and it fell apart. It has a plastic in the inside. Had to epoxy it back on, and I found that the shaft quality is quite good. So let's talk about how to use the shaft tool. Before we start talking about the type of tools, let's look at the geometry of sharpening a tool. So we talked about that 22-degree angle. Chisel is a plane, and it's riding right on the bevel. So you can read a lot of wood carving books, and most of them say that bevel needs to be perfectly flat. It does not. What I like is a chisel that comes down and the bevel is a little bit of a curve. And what you're doing is you're pushing against the fulcrum of that bevel to raise it up. The further that fulcrum is away from the tip, the faster it moves. And I like the control. I like it to move slowly so I've got more control. Wood carving books will talk about the corners, sharp corners, and straight across. That's not always the case. I like a little rounded corner because they seem to be a little bit easier to control. I like to see a little bit of a dome. That dome shape is used for different things. Now, some try to match the dome shape with the amount of curve on it, but the thing to keep in mind is every carver sharpens differently. The way you use the tools is the way you sharpen the tools. So if you want it flat across with sharp corners, that's correct for you. If I want a little bit of a dome shape with rounded corners, that's correct for me. I like to do my sharpening in a protected area. I like to use this here plastic, it's called polywall, because sharpening is messy. The other thing I want to explain about is the oil. I said not to use a lubricating oil because it puts a coating on. Either use a honing oil or use a mineral oil. I like to use mineral oil because for me, it's the same as honing oil. Some people like to use vegetable oil. Don't do that because it turns rancid. So vegetable oil has a protein in, it will turn rancid, it'll get a smell to it. Mineral oil does not have any protein in it, it does not turn rancid. It is very safe to use. People drink it for a laxative. It says right on here for laxative. But this diamond stone, the spray bottle came that you can put water in or the mineral oil. I prefer to use the oil on the stone rather than the water. Both work as well, but the stone can be used dry also. When the stone loads up, you can wash it off with soap and water and it cleans the pores out. But the stone lasts much longer if you're using a lubricant like water or a honing oil like a mineral oil. Instead of using the spray bottle, I use just a few drops of oil. I dip my finger, rub it around on the stone. You don't need much, but when you feel the stone getting a little bit dry, put more on. This stone is diamond. It's Schaaf tools. It's double-sided. This is a 400 grit. 400 grit is like 400 sandpaper. It's coarse. Higher the number, this is 1,000 grit on this side. This gets it ready for the strop. The life of a diamond stone is quite long, but they do wear out. This will make it last years longer. It's nice to keep your sharpening equipment in a closed box, because in your shop you've got sand, dirt, debris flying around. If it falls on your stone or on your strop, those particles are really larger abrasive particles, and they will do scratching. You have to keep your stones clean and your strop clean. I already have the mineral oil on the stone. We said 22-degree angle. So just to put a reference up, I like to bend a piece of paper. If I take this chisel and I put it down here, and I can rock it back and forth, and I can feel that angle. That's the pre-ground angle that Schaaf does on their tools. Very close to 22. It's probably right on the money. Go to the straight tools. Now this is like the knife, to where we had the 22-degree angle, the same as this angle, but because it's coming from both sides like a knife, we have to do 10 degrees on either side, or 11 degrees on either side. So in that case, then when I hold this like that, Schaaf's angles are very close, probably right on the money. They don't need a lot of grinding. They just need to be finish ground. So I'm going to start off right here. I'm going to lay that down. It's at about that 11 degrees. With a stone, it doesn't make any difference what direction that you go. You can go into the cutting edge, away from the cutting edge, in a circular motion. I like to go in a circular motion. And the thing that I do is I'm locking my wrist so I'm not changing that angle. You do it until you feel that you've got a burr raised on there. So I've already got a burr on it right now. And I'm pressing quite hard, and you can see the metal that I've been removing from that gray area there. When I come down with my thumbnail here, it catches just before I go to the end. Regardless of what direction you go, when you get down to where that thickness of metal can't support itself, it raises up like a hook. So it's only on one side. That is ready for the strop. Let's talk about the strop. This buffing compound, which there's many different types, they're all about the same. They have aluminum oxide abrasive, and they have some binders in it that holds it together like a crayon. If we take a substrate, even this piece of cardboard, take the buffing compound on there, and that becomes a strop. Now the cardboard surely doesn't last very long. Canvas, the same. Now I can feel that that's razor sharp. A couple other possibilities is a piece of wood. So you can take a piece of wood, and you see how that crayon just goes right on there. You don't have to cover the whole thing. Now on here I have an angle cut on the end, and that angle is to buff inside of the V-tool. So this is a V-tool, and that gets right in the inside of the V-tool. I'm just rubbing this compound on here, and as I come across with the tool, I can see its darker streaks. And that says I'm removing the metal off of here. I'm buffing it, and actually that half micron abrasive is actually removing the metal. And that's what does the polishing. And you can see the mirror finish starting to develop on there. So how you check for razor sharp, which all carving tools have to be razor sharp. You hold your thumbnail down at a 45 degree, and the tool should not slide off. You just rest the tool on there, and if it catches, aggressively catches it, then that is razor sharp. Here is also a leather strop. I just cut this off of a roll. Again, I took the end and I cut it on an angle. The leather has two sides. It's got a smooth side and it has a rough side. Take the rough side, rub the compound. Now, it doesn't make any difference which ones of the compound I was using here. And I just charge it. Then I will take that same tool that we've been using. You could see how aggressive that it's going. That dark streak is the metal that I'm removing. The substrate, the leather, the wood, and the cardboard will all work. But there is a difference when you use it. Because when I press on the wood stays flat. When I press on the leather is soft, so it's like a pillow action, and it sinks in. So if I'm holding that same 10-degree angle as I'm coming across, and it's 10 degrees because it's from both sides, then that pillow action is springing up, and it is buffing it off at a different angle. It's rolling that edge. So what I need to do when I'm buffing on a soft surface like leather is I need to lower the angle so it just springs up on that side. The first thing that you should do to learn how to sharpen is start off with a knife. This is a carving knife that I've used for many years. And what makes it a nice carving knife is it locks open. It won't close on your fingers. I want to hold this at this, so I have the 10 degree like this. So I'm going to hold it at about that angle. I'm going to go in a circular motion. And I'm feeling a burr already on the tool. So I wipe it off. I take my thumbnail and I'm coming down, and just before it leaves the cutting edge, it's got that hook that's up on there. Another thing with using the stone, use it in this direction because it's easier to lock your wrist in place as you're going across. The same with the strop. Put it in this direction, because if you use it in this direction, then your wrist has to keep changing the angle coming towards you. So this is harder to hold the angle because of your wrist can't be locked. So right now I've got a real nice burr on there. Now once that stone has raised the burr on it, that's as sharp as that stone is going to get it. So I'm going to wipe it off, get some of the dirt off. I'm going to turn it around. I'm using the 400 grit side, and I'm going to go to the 1000 grit size. So this is finer. Now I'm going to make the scratches smaller, and I'm going to use the same action. I already have the oil on here, the mineral oil, and I'm just reducing the size of the scratches. I'm pressing down and putting probably a couple pounds of pressure on it. So I'm quite aggressive. Now I'm feeling that burr. Yes, I am. Okay. Then I will go to the strop. Now the strop I'm going to use is going to be this piece of wood. Now I'm going away from the cutting edge only. On the stone it didn't make any difference, but I can't go into the cutting edge because it'll dig into the wood. So I draw it back and keep that same angle. Don't make the mistake when you come to the end you flip it like this before you leave, because that'll take your edge right off. And so I'm using the same angle on the wood as I did on the stone, because it's a hard surface and so is that a hard surface. So I'm just kind of matching up the same 10-degree angle on each side. Now if I go to the leather and do the same thing, first of all I check it. Oh, that's very sharp. It's catching the thumbnail without sliding off. Now on here, I can't use that 10-degree angle because the pillow action, the leather is soft, so I have to lower it down. So if I use this angle, I'll be going at a more blunt angle. So I lay that down to it's almost flat. And because now that it is a soft material, I want to drag this tip behind so I don't dig it into the leather. Now, for many years I used a leather strop, and I switched over to the hard strop, the wood. After you can get that razor sharp edge on a knife, that's when you can start working with the tools. This is a good gouge to start with right here. This is the number 7, 14 millimeter. And now we're looking at that 22 degrees. What I suggest you do is get a piece of paper, bend it at that 22 degrees. Now that's your gauge. And that will help you in sharpening. And I'm going in that circular motion. I could draw it back like this and roll my wrist at the same time, drawing it back, but I like to go in a circular motion. It's just easier for me to hold that angle. So I'm rocking it side to side and doing the circular motion. Now I'm feeling a nice heavy burr in here. Now you buff it the same way. Let's go to the wood strop here. Same way. Now to do the inside, because it's curved, I'm going to go on the edge of the piece of wood here. This buffing compound should be available in your hardware store. Go to the buffing section and buy the buffing compound that's either for stainless steel or carbon steel. Okay, we wipe it off and we give it a test. Now that's making a nice cut. Cut sounds good and there's no tearing. I enjoy sharpening very much. You have to practice to get good at it. When you're good at it, it's a lot of fun just putting a sharp edge on everything. This stone from Schaaf is very good quality. This is probably the only stone you'll need in your shop. This tremendous base that does not slide around. It's very stable. This stone is very well constructed. The best diamond, it is very aggressive. The two sides, the 400 grit and the 1000 grit, normally I would leave the 1000 grit to the top. You'd only need the 400 if you have a really deep nick in the tool and you have to take off a lot of stock. If you've got just very small little nicks at the edge, need to just touch it up a little bit, you're going to use the 1000 almost all the time. The angle with the paper is a very easy way to approximate that 22 degrees. Sharpening knives, you can do the big butcher knives, everything on this tool. Another way that some carvers use the stones is they set the tool like this, they hold this up, and now you've got a good eye right at that angle, being able to that's a great way to see that you've got the right angle on it. By moving the stone, holding the tool, and I'm going again in that circular motion. If you were using water for your lubricant, your water is going to run off. But the mineral oil has a higher viscosity, and that stays on when you tip it up. So it keeps lubricating the stone. This Mineral oil is also very good for cleaning the stone. So in other words, when you're done, just wipe the stone off. The quality of Schaaf's Diamond Stone is unmatched. Thank you.